Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Did you miss me? I've been off for 2 weeks, but we've been running some really great shows. We reran a show that I did with the famous Dr. Bruce Ames on methylene blue that I taped 11 years ago. And all of a sudden, methylene blue is a really hot thing. I keep telling people, just listen to this show, and then the other people will catch up with what you know. But we did rerun some great shows on Fidogia agrestis, a very popular testosterone boosting herb that I interviewed the fellow who wrote the original study, Dr. Toyin Yakubu, with the University of Ilorin in Ilorin, Nigeria in 2006. And Dr. Huberman is promoting it, and he's got a big audience, and he's a podcaster too. But we talked about it in 2006. Sorry to steal the thunder, but I pay attention to stuff way before it becomes popular. And that's why it's handy to keep me on your list of podcasts to listen to. We have a really great show today. I wanted to start the 17th year in continuous production off with an important show. Well over 60% of Americans, according to AARP, complain about gut problems. You've heard me say that before. It's the truth. And even I have gut issues. They're actually much better now than they were just a year ago. Part of the problem with gut issues is it takes a long time to erode the gut. But people want something that's going to fix it right now because of the discomfort that they live with. But it takes just as long to fix the gut. You have to be confident in the path you're on and stick to it long enough for you to reverse the damage. And patience is critical for resolving a lot of problems when you want to go for the root of the problem instead of a quick fix. The problem with gut problems, I think Hippocrates made it very clear. The word hypochondriac, it comes from Hippocrates, loosely means beneath the ribcage. Hippocrates saw a lot of people. They didn't have a broken leg where you can point at the broken leg, or they didn't have a wound from a sword that they had these problems, but they were ominous and they were hard to hypochondriacs. The word didn't mean then what it means now. Now it means, oh, it's all in your head. And that's why I aptly called today's show, It's All in Your Gut. Because Hippocrates understood that the gut causes systemic-wide problems. So you can't just point at one thing, but it's a real illness that we're dealing with. Fast forward to 2023, the greater portion of 50% of adults in the United States suffer from gut problems. Sometimes they're acute, they go away. Sometimes they're chronic and they last for years. But nonetheless, more and more research is coming forth that all of these different diseases of modernity, Parkinson's disease, they start in the gut. In fact, in Parkinson's disease, the first sign is chronic constipation, and that happens around 10 years before the symptoms of Parkinson's disease show up. And all these other diseases, and including cancers, they start in the gut. So we must stop ignoring our gut problems. I used to hate that by that comedian when he would promote Prilosec. You know, the hot dog was slapping him in his face. My pound and a half of beef just showed up. Thank you so much. The hot dog was slapping him in the face, and the motto of the show, the commercial was, when the foods you love don't love you, take Prilosec. No, bullshit. If foods don't like you, stop eating them. But we as Americans, we don't want to do that. We want to keep eating stuff that destroys our health because it's fun. Well, we're going to talk about today with Dr. Grace Liu is, first of all, how to understand the significance of symptoms and what they point to as far as your gut issues, and what steps to take to actually fix it. If you have gut problems, if you have leaky gut, and by the way, there's a lot of doctors who don't believe in leaky gut. I just would say to them, silent GERD and GERD. Isn't that stuff leaking from your stomach up into your esophagus? How can you say there's no such thing as leaky gut? But you must fix these problems now, because when you're too old to fix them and the disease states kick in, you can't do it. So we're going to talk about that today in just a moment. I have to thank our title sponsor, and that is Legendary Foods, makers of the sweet roll in the same vein as the tasty pastry, which was an upgraded Pop-Tart with less than 1 gram of sugar, 4 to 5 net carbs, 20 grams of high quality dairy protein. They have made the sweet roll. If you remember walking past a Cinnabon and thinking, I'd love to be able to eat that, but it's shit and I can't, now you can enjoy them. The sweet rolls, again, less than 1 gram of sugar, 20 grams of high quality protein, 5 net carbs. Use the code SHR10. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and buy as many as you can, because they run out fast. And without further delay, get my guest on here. It's been so long since I've done it. Okay, here we go. Dr. Grace Liu. How you doing, Dr. Liu?
Hi. Really awesome.
Good. I'm glad you're here. And this really is, I talk a lot about type 2 diabetes as being the #1 killer of Americans. And people don't say, no, it's cancer, it's heart disease. No, you get cancer and heart disease because you were diabetic too long. This is another one of those things that people just can adjust their life around living with a really bad gut. Do you see that yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it goes the whole spectrum. I used to do talks about, elite athletes and how they ruin their gut with endurance training or endurance, camp and the conditioning part, and then the event itself, right? And people just don't believe it. People have gut heart attacks, actually. Athletes can have gut heart attacks. And all these things, athletes aren't resistant to cancers. We know many famous athletes who develop breast cancer. Marathon runners develop breast cancers, and prostate cancers is faster than the regular population. And why is that? Well, studies appear to show that it starts in their gut, and these events even may preclude them to all of it.
In fact, I read recently somewhere, and I'm going to ask you because I don't believe things the first time I read them, that high-intensity interval training, which is all the rage because it literally reduces visceral fat specifically. So we want to get rid of visceral fat. That's I call the radioactive fat. But it also seems to affect the junctions in the gut. Why is it? I'm sorry?
Yeah, it probably has to do with conditioning. Yeah, any start of like training, it's a new stressor, right? There are a lot of benefits with short-term hit, and then long-term hit is associated with higher levels of humanin. And we know when we inject a peptide called humanin, we get 4x muscle growth, according per study, some human studies. So there's always a risk-benefit analysis for anything we do, and I think a lot of it may depend on factors that we're not even aware of, and we may not focus on necessarily. Some things we can't really test for, but now in this modern age, tech is kind of stealing our health, but now we have tech to help us get out of it, like your show, running for over 17 years, and you've been talking about peptides. I'm in my infancy. I just found out about it like fucking a year ago. So now I'm just super excited because it's such a fast, rapid regenerative way of healing. And maybe the right time is now too, because the products now are less contaminated and, less mannitol, less problems that would have triggered autoimmune problems like 5, 10, 20 years ago.
Right. And it's interesting. So people will buy peptides and start using them before they actually do the hard work of correcting their lifestyle. To talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. We were just talking about this before the show, you and I, Carl. I mean, I teach health coaches and physicians our philosophies at the Gut Institute, and I teach about the 4 R's. They're really radically different than what we learn in functional medicine. I'm a traditional trained pharmacist, clinical pharmacist. I used to do a lot of chronic disease management, huge populations, and when I came to integrative medicine. We talked about all the R's, restore, recolonize, blah, blah, blah. No one looked at rhythm. And, you talk a lot about rhythm, sex, sleep, sunlight. These are rhythms. And when we get out of rhythm, like you and I are not a fan of metformin because it pushes our AMPK out of rhythm.
Right.
You need to have it. You need some insulin to push the protein in the fucking muscle.
Right.
And so there's no muscle growth at all, zero with moderate to high dose metformin. I don't know how you're going to get longevity if you start developing sarcopenia with your workouts.
And that's, I used to say, okay, so when people would argue with me about the fact that I have never been a fan of metformin, and I'm so glad because it's coming out now that it doesn't work the way everybody thought it was. But I would say to them, so let me get this straight. I'm going to live to be 100, 140, but I'm going to be stuck in a wheelchair because I can't stand up anymore. Really?
Yeah, exactly. And you're gonna have a broken gut if it's metformin.
Yes. So let's go right to one of the topics that's real hot right now. And I'm a big fan of nothing is a magic bullet. Things are good in circumstances, things are bad in circumstances. People go after IGF-1 and they want to extinguish it from the body. But what they don't realize is that IGF-1 is important to healthy cells. And one of the things that people don't realize is IGF-1 is a powerful anti-inflammatory. They go, what? Yeah, it causes cancers to grow because there's a push-pull effect. There's growth, and then it turns off inflammation that would control growth.
There's a rhythm, right?
Yeah, and so let's talk about Akkermansia. It's all the rage. It's being sold everywhere. It's the answer to everybody's. Akkermansia has a place, but it doesn't have a place. Talk about Akkermansia.
Yes. So when I look at the small intestine or the large intestine, I'm looking at a tube. Like I don't go surfing because I might kill myself, but surfers go through a tube, right? And yeah, so exactly, our gut's the same. There's a tube, and there's an inner lumen, and this is what we sample. And a lot of our studies are based on what's in their inner lumen, which are kind of ridiculous. Our immune system is at the edge. We don't sample it because it would require invasive techniques and even biopsy. And this is actually where our immune system lies, next to the G cells and all these panda cells. Our immune system and the microbiome there is called the MAM, almost like mom. We get this matrilineally extracted, through vaginal birth. And it's been since the dawn of time for the last hundreds and hundreds of millions of years through mammalian placental birth. This is handed down from our 100th generation mother, grandmother, great because it's through vaginal birth if you survive, right? And the MAM is known as the mucosa associated microbiome, and so that's what I study, and that's what tells me about health. And many things determine that. You talked about your 23andMe and other podcasts. We have an FUT2 mutation. It benefits us. We don't get norovirus for those who are negative. Also, you're more likely to be a long-term non-progressor for HIV. There's benefits that survive evolution as a selective pressure. But the negative is what studies show in the modernity is that these people have less bifido. So I created a probiotic to bypass these mutations because these are the clients we see. They all have hits. Homozygous, heterozygous, many heterozygous hits on this FUT2. It also determines different cancers because our surfaces, they're all lined by mucosa, especially where our immune system is, the lymph. And it determines, it's a sugar, so it attracts good bacteria. So if you have a mutation, you don't attract good bacteria, you got to make it up for it. And our kind, since Australopithecus and Paranthropus and all the Homo habilis erectus, they all ate a butt ton of fiber. Estimates are hundreds and hundreds of grams of fiber. And as we move from primate, you know, and move toward more fat and meat, which had less fiber, we still retain a lot of fiber, and that fed the microbiome where our FUT2 does not. We didn't need it, right? It's outsourced. So why we can actually go and not have it. And so genetically it could have, you know, had other advantages by not having norovirus, which would kill elderly and children. So there's also like selective evolutionary pressure that makes us who we are
Right.
currently, which I'm so grateful for my ancestors. I mean, before I
Right.
was, I would be like, oh, you cursed me. But now I'm actually really grateful. Like, you know, there's so many benefits. That's why I am here, for the miracle, right? That I am.
I was just going to say,
So
the fact that we are here, the fact that
yes,
we are here having this conversation means that our ancestors were
exactly.
really strong, viable individuals. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I have iron overload like you, which is great because during this bottleneck, foods like grains and beans, legumes and lentils, they had high lectins and oxalates, right? And these bound up iron. So if your mama didn't have high iron, you were born practically brain dead, low IQ. Low iron will lead to brain loss, IQ loss. But this bottleneck kept iron strong in your mom and your other grandmothers, and that allowed you, you know, your lineage to survive, perhaps. And same with mine. We're warriors as well. It's a EPO effect. Our
Right.
blood's doped. Yeah. The problem is in this day and time, if you're pure carnivore, you don't have these oxalates, lectins, and anti-nutrients to bind up iron. You end up with higher iron. And then if your body's fighting, your ferritin goes high because it grabs all the iron and it's an acute phase reactant. So your immune system, if it has to deal with constant marauders, pathogens, invaders, especially at the MAM, the mucosa-associated microbiome, they're going to be utilizing all kinds of oxidative things. You know, this is why HSCRP will go up. It's just trying to fight subclinical infections. And I sent you an article because we live in a world full of antibiotics. And now everyone wants to take, you know, doxycycline, ivermectin, and blah, blah, blah,
Yeah. Right.
azithromycin.
Right.
You know,
And
these are used
and that
for
zithromycin. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Zithromycin.
yeah. And they want
Yeah.
to take all these for this, like, oh, so-called really scary viral thing. And now they're like with super sanitation, you know, hygiene now, and people afraid of touching one another. We're not even getting good flora probiotics from other people through kissing and hugging. This is
That's
our
why
microbial cloud.
when I'm at the gym and somebody wipes down the machine I want to use, I go, no, 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 don't do that. I want to build an immune system. And they
Only
look
if
at me
they
like
look
I'm an
good.
idiot.
If they don't look good, I wouldn't go near them.
Yeah.
You know, I'm joking.
No, I mean that's part of evolution too. You know, women
Yeah.
sensed what men had to offer that would help their offspring by what they picked up, the pheromones, but also what they picked up from their breath and their sweat. They, you know,
Exactly.
there's some people that you've dated in your life where you were just turned off by their sweat. And there was some people like it was like perfume to you. There's a reason for
Sure.
that. But anyway.
Oh, sure. Or they faked you out. They learned their pheromones learned how to fake you out.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Yeah.
so you mentioned oxalate. That's another big hot topic right now, right? You know,
Mhm.
people think almonds are good for them, but they're high in oxalate. So when did oxalates become an issue, and are they really that big of an issue for inflammatory response?
So let's go back to like evolution and our long-lived societies currently on Earth. Are you familiar with the blue zones,
Yes, I
centenarians?
am. Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
studying them. They have microbiome
Yeah.
studies, they have adrenal
Play.
sex studies, they have so many studies. So even the probiotic I formulated, Bifida maximus, they've been out for almost 10 years. It's based on centenarian microbiomes. We have the highest concentration in the industry for bifidobacteria longum. Longum is is a high density probiotic found in long-lived people. Age match, they're 80s, 90s, 100. They're disease-free, they're cancer-free, they're chronic disease-free. You know, they're not also rarely getting antibiotics. They usually live in poor rural areas. So they're eating straight, you know, fork to table,
All right.
fork to
Right.
farm table. And they're poor. So they're really going to get antibiotics or
They rarely
hospital
see a
care.
doctor. Yeah, they don't see a
Yeah.
doctor. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll contrast that, you know, to my life, which I'm a pharmacist, so I'm super polypharm. I used to be super polypharmacy. My dad's a surgeon. My stepmom's a doctor. My real mom was a pharmacist. You know, we got a lot of polypharmacy growing up. Every sniffle, fever. I'm the oldest, so I got the pink pill, liquid. You know, with every sniffle, fever, you know, problem. I was the first to get Hashimoto's in my family, and then my younger sister got Graves. You know, my third sister has, you know, some autoimmune condition. My little brother had an autoimmune kidney disease or disorder that required steroids for many years. However, my parents, they lived in rural areas, no running water, an outhouse for a toilet in Taiwan, right? They ate a lot of dried fish growing up, but they're healthy as crazy. They can eat gluten. You know, they don't have gut problems like my sisters and I.
And they do eat gluten, you're saying, or they don't eat gluten?
Yeah, they eat gluten and they're totally fine. And I even eat gluten and I'm
Yeah.
generally kind of fine if I'm doing high dose probiotics and fibers. And then our clients, we have them eat gluten in 6 months just to check, you know. And initially when they come to us, they can't even go near gluten. A bite of gluten, like 5 parts per million, 1 part per billion, you know, will put them in bed and have chronic fatigue and, you know, poor hormones, no functionality. So all this is kind of related, and that's the contrast, right? Like, you know, how do we get sick? We have tons of studies now, and so I look at European studies in the Centenarians. They don't have the same effect with pesticides and glyphosate and antibiotics in their society until more recently, you know, by most records. So centenarians are like that as well. Like they have very few antibiotics. Their biomes are just great. They have a lot of connectivity, like you talk about. And so I model a lot of our protocols here at the Gut Institute and even the peptides. I wish we had peptide studies. Maybe someday we'll get those. Based on how they live, you know, what their biome might be like, what their rhythms might be like, or what we know of, and what their peptides and hormones might be like. So the interesting thing about centenarians, they have very large, robust adrenal glands. The hormone values for age-matched sick controls versus them, non-sick, are much higher. They're robust, and they're not on HRT.
I remember reading a study decades ago that indicated centenarians also have optimized thyroid function. In other words, they don't produce a lot of TSH. The thyroids are very responsive. And, you know, I don't think people realize that thyroid hormone is a mitochondrial uncoupling agent. It actually makes work harder. When your thyroid hormone is high, it makes work harder because the mitochondria is chugging along there, you know, working against the tide, so to speak. And these people seem to have really high functioning thyroid systems, and I guess it produces less wear and tear over time. It's the only the only thing I could guess from it.
So you mean their free T4 and free TS are high? T3 are high?
Is high, but it's not hyper, but it's high, and TSH is very, very low.
Yes, yeah. My goal ultimately for a lot of people, if their brain is working well without CTBIs, you know, is a TSH of around 0.5 to 1. That's what population studies show are normal. Yeah, and with a good thyroid, your body temperatures are good, so you'll naturally make more testosterone and progesterone. Your enzymes for like pancreatic enzymes, digestive enzymes, they're all going to work much better. For every degree below 98.6 Fahrenheit, you know, every degree below, we have a dramatic reduction in these pancreatic enzyme functions. They just won't digest food for you.
Well, they don't. Dr. Robert Gorder, who used to teach at UCLA, but he got ran out because he was using hyperthermia therapy and dendrite therapy to cure cancers. He, in fact, this is a fascinating story in and of itself. So he would take people's dendrites, spin them, concentrate them, and inject them right into a tumor, and the tumor would be gone in like 4 days. And then the other thing he did was, and I laughed when he told me this, he makes people like a hamburger in a McDonald's, you know, under the heat lamp. They used to have these tubes that they would put the people in, they raise their body temperature, keep the head out.
Wow.
And induce fever. And it would reverse the most aggressive pancreatic cancers. But he was run out of UCLA. And today he is the head of the Gorder Model Cancer Institute in Cologne, Germany, where they are curing aggressive cancers day in and day out. And I said, what is it about heat? And he says it amplifies and speeds up the P450 cytochrome enzyme cascade, which is every single important enzyme that's in your body that's produced in your liver. That's what fever does. He said that's what fever. He says when you have a fever, the body goes into high alert, and wants to kill everything. And how it does that is by raising body temperature, these enzymes become supercharged and more abundant, and bam, you get better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was like, so interesting for me to see some clients, they decided to get a vax. Okay. I was like, great. Okay. Well, I wouldn't have done that or advised that. But they actually felt better in their condition because they mounted a little fever that they otherwise normally wouldn't have, because we track core body temperatures.
And that's the adjuvants. I interviewed a guy from the UK
Oh,
who
yeah.
lost his
Yeah, could be.
license. Well, he lost his license because he came on several podcasts, including mine. I think I was the only one that he did in the United States, where he said the problem with vaccines is they are causing widespread autoimmune disorders. If you look at baby boomers forward, we were the ones who started getting all the vaccines. He said the adjuvants turn the immune system on to anything. So if they have a peanut protein in there, you get a little bit of the peanut protein. He says, and this is what I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. And albumin from egg whites, right? That's probably why we have such a huge egg white problem currently.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which
but
I'm sorry. Go.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, the next question I wanted to ask you was, what foods seem to be the biggest offenders when we look at autoimmunity? And when we talk about autoimmunity, we're talking about the gut, because the immune system, the inflammation is the army of the immune system, and the immune system's in your gut. So when we talk about these things, we're talking about this whole dynamic range of functions. But are there really good examples of, well, this is an offender? If you have autoimmune disease, perhaps it's stay away from dairy. I don't know. Anything that you can point at?
Yeah, so this is really great when integrative medicine is much more precise. I mean, I still believe we're in the primitive age of testing. I mean, most tests are kind of ridiculously not going to be selective or specific enough and not reliable. We eat one food and our whole testing will change. One meal will literally change, or beverage will literally change any testing that we currently do at this time. And but I do like testing. It gives us some idea of certain things going on. So I like immune testing. That for me is my dashboard. Just like, if you have a car or a Tesla or whatever, hybrid or Toyota, you have a dashboard. You want to see if your gas light is going empty, right? You want to see if there's other alerts or indicators. So we have some crude, testing. One is just your immune system based on IgGs, immunoglobulins, subset G. They go like A, B, C, D all the way to Z practically. So G is like a very narrow range, but it tells us a lot. So I do a really simple, cheap test from Great Plains Lab. They're out in Kansas. And I can see what people are allergic to. In general, if everyone's leaky, 70% of primary care visits are gut related. Well, like 100% of anyone with a chronic illness, any kind of brain fog, body fat, fatigue issue, challenge, or PAX, post-acute CD19 syndrome, we're looking at like widespread gut problems right now. And especially because people don't take enough probiotics. If you don't replenish, it's like your garden, if you don't feed it, nourish it, add compost, fertilizer, put some sunlight, water on your garden, it's going to die. So, and not have diversity or abundance, or like a wealth portfolio. If you have just lots of bankruptcy and terrible assets and no diversification, like really, you're not going to really have much wealth, right? So that's how I look at it, a portfolio. Right. So I do testing, and I presume everyone's leaky. If they're coming to me and they're saying, oh, I'm dealing with this or that or XYZ, or my testosterone's not at the peak for the age group, there's something going on. And it's always going to come down to the gut, whether it's heavy metals, mycotoxins, mold, Borrelia, Lyme, other co-infections, Epstein-Barr, it doesn't matter. There's gut consequences. Like I can pull depending on the disease state, 2 to 20 studies for any one of the things I just mentioned. So the thing is, if someone's leaky, no matter what they're eating, they're allergic to.
Yeah, because it's getting into their bloodstream.
Yeah, it doesn't take a brain surgeon. Their gut's open. It's like, well, if you live in certain parts of town, if your door is open, well, guess what? You probably will have, different people coming in. You may have the mob or homeless people or just, cranky teenagers. I mean, it doesn't matter, right? Like if the door is open, you build it. If the door is open, they will come. So our ultimate goal is to seal and heal the gut. And then this seals everything. When there's leaky gut, there's leaky brain, leaky vagina, leaky prostate, leaky blah, 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 heart, blood vessels, you name it. And that's why I love the peptides, like BPC 157. Oh my God, it's great. Let's say people don't have a fever response. We can restore it. Or let's say they have like pyretic related Lyme, so they're high fever all the time. They're only 98.6 because they have a freaking fever. So, BPC, if people tolerate it, they don't have SIRS. So complex, high histamine states, we don't use BPC. People don't tolerate it. It'll make them far worse because it mobilizes mast cells. So guess what? Then they just release more histamines.
Right.
That is an absolute contraindication. Yeah. So certain peptides we absolutely do not use. 25% of my clients, my subsets, they don't tolerate BPC, even oral. So we may just get tolerance by dropping a little drop on, literally 550 micrograms at first to start, orally on the mouth, not even mucosally.
I have a question. A question. So BPC 157 is a downstream metabolite of 25-hydroxy, vitamin D, basically.
I didn't know that. I tried to find the origin. Are you serious?
Oh yeah, no. Oh yeah. So my theory is, if you take
that's from you, Carl. That's awesome.
The 25-OHD is a precursor to LL37. I'm sorry. You said
I said BPC.
Forget it.
Okay, yes. I think it's made by our whole GI tract.
Yes.
And TB4 is made by almost every cell, and we find it at super high concentration in babies because what are they doing all day freaking long? They're just eating and sleeping. That's it. So when they're not sleeping, they're eating, and their mouth, suckles, and it ends up hurting. So they have the highest concentration we find in TB4 is in neonates, babies, postpartum, and they're just wearing down their mouth, and moms, breasts, and nipples. And so it's evolutionary, it goes to where it's needed. And that's how these things work, right? They regenerated us from birth.
I don't know how I got onto LL37, but what
we'll get to that at some point.
But one of the things I did want to ask you was, I studied breast milk for quite a few years. I actually came out with a protein supplement that was modeled around human breast milk, but it didn't do well because protein is a commodity item. Nobody wants to pay $20 a pound for it. But with that being said, bifido is very, very high in human breast milk, and that's why I always became interested in it. And the oligosaccharides in breast milk are not to feed the baby, but to feed the microbes to keep them alive long enough for the baby to, it's really fascinating. Like this journey.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So when you look at, but my question to you is this. Can we change the terrain by introducing the microbes, or do we have to change the terrain first and then introduce the microbes?
Well, every person is really different, what their tolerance is. So I mentioned to you, whatever the best diet is not what they're currently eating often, right? And the most stickiest proteins like gluten, dairy, casein, nuts, even coconut, avocado count as nuts, but all the nuts are a little sticky. So we have them rotate out. And then the best, even athletes, it's best to, Poliquin did this, Charles Poliquin. I got this idea from him to rotate the proteins in his Olympic athletes because they're, working at such high, I work with some MMA fighters too. They're getting ready for camp and fighting. And, these little tweaks, they make a difference in their performance and agility, and small fractional seconds, are a big deal, in the ring. And, so whatever they're currently eating, we rotate out, and even the protein. So you go red meat 1 week, poultry 1 week, so duck, goose, chicken, turkey, and pork maybe 1 week, right? And then seafood 1 week. This gets these proteins out of the mix. So the immune system, everything I do is the immune system. So we can heal the immune system. It can get, it won't get exhausted. If it's exhausted, it'll get better. Yeah. So it's just not to see that antigen. We call it an antigen. If it's the rapid fire triggers, it's the foreign marauder, right? That's what our immune system's rapidly, the reason why we're so highly evolved to be so rapid fire is because we had a parasite. We had parasites, and we had another big parasite called a fetus. And you had to know the difference, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I had to know the difference. But now we've gotten confused. It's inundated. So just like if you put a couple blindfolds on military men, you're going to get friendly fire. They're going to start killing each other. Yeah, they're confused, tired, exhausted, took too much amphetamines. I don't know, right? So, we will have to correct that and get them, rested, replenished. And so the diet is the best to rest. And I look at the structure of our mucosal associated microbiome because we have ABCs there. I call them just 3 basic subsets. A is for the main group, Akkermansia. It's 5% of the whole stool flora. We have, we only have about 300 species, unique ones. So Akkermansia is actually quite a big one. It's 5 out of like 100%, 5% out of 100 potentially. And then Bifido is quite high too. At the mucosa, they're even 1 or 2% out of all of them. So it's quite a lot. And so I stuff my probiotics full of them because, as you know, from birth to centenarian life, bifidos are important. And longum's one of the one that leads the whole way from birth all the way to over 100 years old. And the best diet is where we can regrow the MAM. And at first, because the immune system, if it's primed, even lactobacilli, if it's leaking into the bloodstream, the body may be attacking it. And people may not feel well. So some of the people with the worst guts, the most mold, the IBD clients, inflammatory bowel disease, they don't tolerate any probiotic. Maybe soil probiotics they tolerate because they don't take it currently as a probiotic. So it's not in the system. The body isn't highly flared to it, right? That's okay. But slowly we want to introduce some inulin oligosaccharides that mimic mucus, right? Milk, human milk oligosaccharides, things like that. And then the bifidos, even if it's a teeny pinch, some of my long haulers, new clients that are long haul, they don't tolerate bifido in the beginning. It's 50-50, but then eventually they do. They must. A part of every foundational garden, rainforest, there's like a foundation. And for the human lifespan, bifidos at the foundation. So B is bifido. And Bacteroides. Bacteroides are omnivores of the gut. They eat both protein and fats. And then the C stands for Clostridialis. These are our butyrate makers. They make the most healing fats out of all the whole microbiome. They're at the mucosa level and in the lumen. They're so important. And we can do postbiotics. There's a lot of tributyrin products, they're all amazing, awesome. We give pounds of it, like 10, 20 capsules a day for people. Because they don't make it, they've lost their C's. So we want eventually fiber that will feed these. And actually it's cook-resistant starches that feed the butyrate makers. People cannot be reliant on taking a tributyrin supplement forever. They're kind of fucked if they can't eventually make it on their own. It's like a wealth portfolio. You can't just keep feeding cash in. You got to eventually have like dividends and accumulation.
Yeah, right.
That's 7% rule, right? Yeah, you double every 7 years if you get 7%.
You invest your money and then you wait for your money to start working for you.
You want to watch it. Yeah.
We have questions from listeners that I'm going to put up now, and then we're going to take a break. And when we come back, I want to revisit where I was going a little bit about the terrain supporting the microbes, and I have some questions. So the first one is, and I can't see your name because of your security settings on, but it says, what kind of gut biome testing do you recommend?
I recommend any of them right now. I mean, they all kind of suck, I have to admit. Like, they're not ideal for me. Yeah, they don't tell you that much. I use a metabolite test. In gut testing, it's called metabolomic testing. So we can see the 2 kingdoms in the gut. The fungal, which is the hardest to deal with because their cells are like ours, and then the bacterial ones. So you see both SIFO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth, and you see SIBO, bacterial overgrowth, and that's by Great Plains. And then DSL, Diagnostic Solutions Lab, they have their own version. It's not as great in my opinion, but it's okay. They have their own version of a metabolomic urine testing now.
I pronounce it incorrectly. I say metabolomics, but when metabolomics or metabolomic first became a area of research, I was so excited because now we're going to actually see what food and what nutrients do what. It's an exciting area of research, in my opinion. Very, very exciting. Again, I can't see your screen name because it's being blocked by your security settings. But how does the gallbladder removed adversely affect gut biome? Good question, because a lot of people these days are having their gallbladders removed. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a big gluten problem and autoimmune gluten problem and casein problem. Sometimes it doesn't at all. For others, it can be a big, big deal because gallbladder, the function of it is to reclaim cholesterol. It's a lot of energetics for our human body, mammalian body, to make fats. Cholesterol is easier if we eat it. And why cholesterol? Because it's our hormones. It essentially is our life. Hormones are our life. If we have no hormones, we have no life. Can't raise body temperature. No, even thyroid is somewhat fat-based. And we need fats. Our brain is like, oh my God, like hundreds of like omega-3s in there. And we just like, we're plain stupid and depressed, if we don't have these.
Right.
So the gallbladder's function, the bile, is to reclaim the hormones and cholesterol for functioning. So we don't have to eat so much of it, and hormones too. So we don't have to make so much of it. And the detergents, if they're not conjugated properly, then they end up causing cancers because we're melting. Those detergents are melting the gut lining. The way we set up a leaky gut model in gut research is we give them a whole bunch of detergents, DSS.
Really?
Oh yeah, like instantly. Or the high fat diet. So some people think, oh, it's so lovely to have a really high fat diet. Well, most genetic types don't really tolerate it. It melts the lipid bilayers of our microvilli. You just have to be careful, And I'm not a big fan of like all the oat milks and almond milks, even though I love them, but there's a lot of emulsifiers in them, gums, I don't care how you cut it. Yeah, gels and gums.
Oh,
they're all emulsifiers.
These gels, xanthan gum and stuff like that, they screw up the little proton pumps in your gut. And they cause all sorts of problems. It's horrible. I want to take a break. We have questions from Aiden Ray. Aiden, we're going to get to these after the break. Stay with us. We are talking today with Dr. Grace. I tried to change your name into Bruce. Dr. Grace Lee. Let me give you
Incredible Hulk.
I'm really effing up here. I want to put this up real quick for the audience. You can learn more by learning about the Gut Institute. And in fact, if you go to shrnetwork.biz/gut reset, GUTRESET, you can view the products and learn the information. There's a lot of great stuff there. You can also use the code SHR10. She was kind enough for this interview to make a discount for my audience. It'll save 10% off on all orders. So again, shrnetwork.biz/gut reset, GUTRESET, all one word. And we will be right back with more soup. Promise. So stay with us.
Dogs should be powered by fat and protein, not carbs. That's why Visionary Pet makes low-carb, ketogenic dog food for dogs of all breeds and life stages. From kibble to freeze-dried and even low-carb treats, all Visionary Pet recipes are very low-carb, ketogenic, and made with 100% real meat protein. Shop now and use code SHR for 20% off your first order today. Your dog deserves the lifelong benefits of optimal nutrition. Make the switch to Visionary and see why smart dogs eat low carb.
I've said numerous times that Be Strong BFR bands are as effective, if not more effective, than anabolic steroids. And as someone who has used anabolic steroids for many years and used Be Strong BFR bands, I know what I'm talking about. You will see changes in musculature in days and weeks using Be Strong BFR bands, and without any of the risks to your health associated with anabolic steroid use. Go to shrnetwork.biz/be strong. That's BSTRONG, and use code SHR15 to save 15% off. I guarantee you will not be disappointed in the results of using the Be Strong bands. Check them out. There are lots of concerns about food supply today. That's why you need White Oak Pastures. White Oak Pastures will deliver food right to your doorstep. You don't even have to go out and be disappointed by shopping in grocery stores. The finest beef, pork, lamb, duck, and more can be found at White Oak Pastures. And now they even have seafood. And best of all, White Oak Pastures has a negative carbon footprint, which means that you don't have to feel guilty for eating your ribeye. Go to shrnetwork.biz/white oak and use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 15% off. P3OM from Bioptimizers is a patented prebiotic and probiotic supplement with Lactobacillus plantarum OM. It has now been upgraded to P3OM 2.0 with the addition of a superfood formulation that makes it 2 times stronger, as well as optimizes L. plantarum's strength. So it's more powerful than ever, which means that not only will it help you completely digest all animal proteins, it also reduces cortisol, causes deep relaxation and better sleep, and reduces stress. Go to shrnetwork.biz/P3-OM today and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off.
You're listening to the Superhuman Channel. We're ripped and we're ready.
Man, I took 2 weeks off and I forgot how to produce my own show. I'm like, wait, what do I do next? Oh, my own. Before I move any further, I gotta tell some of my audience members who carry guns, like I do, that we are launching Gun Leash this month. Gun Leash is a small little stamp-sized device that you attach to your gun that will keep you from losing your gun. Over 500,000 guns a year are lost. It's astonishing to me. The number one place where people leave them is restrooms, public restrooms. Even cops lose their guns. I was just recently talking to a guy who's bringing me to the Department of Defense. They have a problem with lost guns in certain categories of agents. And so we released Gun Leash. It's been 2 years in the making. I have some audience members that actually invested in the startup. Thank you for that. Sean Wasson, who's always watching the show, he's one of my first investors. Well, we're coming to market, and if you want to be able to get your hands on one in January when we release them, you should go over to gunleash.com and sign up for email notifications of when it is available, because we will be offering these to the people who sign up first before the general public who comes to the website. So secure your Gun Leash today. Go to gunleash.com. Never lose your gun. Never leave your gun. I invented it. I patented it. I'm so smart. Okay, enough of that. Let's talk more about the microbiome. So let's do some more. I got to. Well, we're gonna wait. So here's what I want to ask you. We learned from studies that we talked about on this show over the years that there's a symbiotic relationship between hormones and microbes. For instance, oxytocin raises L-reuteri. L-reuteri is associated with better aging. People who are in estrogen dominance and testosterone dominance, bodybuilders, they seem to see a shift in certain microbes. So if in fact there's a relationship between microbes and hormones, does it make sense to do hormone panels on your patients before prescribing bifido? And are there hormones that correlate with bifidobacteria, for instance?
Oh, that's a really good question. I haven't drilled that down, but probably because the protective ones. So, I had sent to you some articles from Tremolin. He's a researcher in Australia. Mm-hmm. He's in the Adelaide School of Pharmacy there. And when I came across his work, I was looking up research to help a lot of my ladies who have different infertility issues, PCOS or uterine fibroids or cysts. And I came across, I have a male program coming out this year called DUDE, Decode Your Dick, UR education.
Oh.
And then I came across his testosterone study. And so hormones are highly related to how tight and sealed our gut is. And so Tremolin was just super progressive. He gave a low dose of something known as lipopolysaccharide, like LPS.
Yeah,
it's a cell wall, a partial cell wall of, it's part of the cell wall of gram negatives. So gram negatives are, we have good ones, but they tend to be more the naughty ones, right? And we all have a little bit, and it's no big deal. If we get stressed, gram negatives, they send out adrenaline and cortisol. Well, they detect adrenaline and cortisol. They have something called pathogenicity islands in their DNA. And literally they're like fat boys. They're just like waiting for a keg to come and then like adrenaline, cortisol come barreling down, and that's their kick, and then they just go, nutty, like they're at
Right.
Chico State or something. So they're all, it doesn't matter how many we have, if our body's taking, it's all regulated and happy, high oxytocin, calm, right? When we're high oxytocin, we're also calm generally. I don't think they're uncoupled too much. It's really hard. But I do like oxytocin. Sometimes we'll inject it, some nasal doesn't really seem to work.
No, you're right. And I want to share something with you, peptide wise. Okay.
Okay.
If you have a patient who can't tolerate, like I take 100 units of oxytocin at a time, 2 times a day, post-workout and before bed.
Yeah.
And most people get a super head rush. Their heart starts pounding. They get nervous. They don't. If you have somebody that reacts that way to injectable oxytocin, add GHRP6, equal amounts in micrograms.
Okay.
So if you're going to give somebody 100 IUs of oxytocin, which many people will say, like I've had people email me saying that they were afraid they had to go to the hospital because their heart is pounding so fast after a fairly large dose of oxytocin.
Are these do you think they're like oxytocin naive, like they don't have a lot of connection in their life, or they're really super isolated?
I mean, it could be. It could be. But what I discovered by accident, because of a stack that I use post-workout and before bed, is if you have a person you want to give 100 IUs of oxytocin, you add to that 100 micrograms of GHRP6 or GHRP2, either one, and as long as it's GHRP.
6. Okay.
It suppresses vasopressin, which is what causes that. When you make love, I mean, we all want to think like we're super lovers, but when you orgasm, like your body's going to explode. It's pounding. Like imagine orgasming and then jumping up and running up the stairs. You wouldn't be able to do it because like your heart's pounding, your head's pounding. Well, that's vasopressin. It's not because you're such a stud, you work so hard. Well, if you take GHRP equal micrograms to units, you don't get any head rush, you don't get anything. And
100 micrograms, that's it. Okay, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I've had some clients have problems, so I didn't know that hack. I'm really grateful for that. That's super awesome.
Yes, so it's equal in micrograms to IUs. If you give them 50 IUs and they get a head rush, give them 50 micrograms of GHRP along with it in the same syringe.
Okay, 1-to-1 ratio. Okay, you found 1-to-1 ratio is okay.
1-to-1 ratio, micrograms to units. Cool. Yes. Oh man, it's
I love oxytocin because a lot of my clients have gut problems, so they've had like usually we cure constipation. I hate to say cure, but we do in 2 to 4 weeks or less. It's usually overgrowth of certain things in the gut. Usually, candida along with like some gram negatives and parasites and mold and blah, 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 right? Usually we can cure it, but some are a little more tenacious. It's almost an autoimmune problem. And I like oxytocin. It can move the gut. It promotes motility when we get the higher dosing.
It has so many benefits that we can't even list it. You got to remember, from an evolutionary perspective, we have one
loss.
job.
Like I'm a fat girl right now. Like, I mean, anything that helps fat loss is like usually nice.
From an evolutionary perspective, procreation is job number one. That's all we're here to do, to keep furthering the species. And the reward hormone for doing your job is oxytocin. Think about it. That's exactly it. The oxytocin is what makes you feel so good after sex. So great. Oh my God, that was amazing. I love you. Well, that's oxytocin. Oxytocin is the carrot. It's going to teach you to keep having sex. And it has, the more sex you have, the more likely men will not develop prostate cancer at all. In fact, we talked about 3 different studies that show that. But the other thing is you talked about uterine fibroids. The more a man ejaculates in you, a woman, the less likely you are to get a fibroid. So
that
when you do
sense.
things that are related
the seminal fluids are full of oxytocin. I mean, we have oxytocin like circulatory areas everywhere. Yeah,
that's why when I did a list of things that people should do, eat an ancestral diet. We have a good question about ancestral diets. Eat an ancestral diet, get lots of sun. I'm not afraid of the sun. People don't get skin cancer from the sun; they get it from their diets. I know people who have skin cancer in areas that have never seen the sun.
Seed oils, seed oils are terrible.
But the other thing I said, have sex 4 times a week. and get
Not four
get
times a day, Carl?
no, no. I have to work. I have a job. Listen, don't get me wrong. I think a lot of guys and gals will probably attest to this. We'd all like to, right? But you got to go to.
You could substitute your 100 IU's oxytocin twice a day with sex.
Yeah, but now so one of the things that oxytocin does that we've seen both in 2 good rat studies is it makes old muscle repair like new. So oxytocin actually is part of the anabolic cascade. And I'll tell you a secret that a lot of people don't know. I've talked about it on this show before. But the reason trenbolone is so strong as an anabolic steroid is it upregulates oxytocin 50-fold. And this is why people who use trenbolone, it's a very powerful anabolic steroid, they say, oh, it destroys my cardio. I can't walk up the stairs anymore. Revert back to my comment before. If you just had an orgasm and you ran up the stairs, imagine how winded you'd be. Well, trenbolone builds muscle by upregulating oxytocin 50-fold. It's the strongest anabolic steroid available.
50-fold. That's
and
powerful.
that was found in cow studies because cows are given trenbolone 6 months before they are sacrificed. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All good shit. All good shit.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, do you want to hear what I do with a lot of my
yes.
My elite clients to build oxytocin? Because I track a lot of HRV in clients now. Like I'm just super biohacker babe now. Like I track HRV on everybody, and I take care of a lot of clients. They're like experts on vagal nerve or experts on HRV. They can't get their HRV the fuck up. So they come to me, it's like 10, 15, 18 max. And same with long haulers. So this is how we get it 3x, 5x higher. Because normally I shoot for an ideal of like 100 to 120.
Right.
So our heart, right? It's all connected to also our ear, nose, throat. There's Stephen Porges is a big proponent of something known as the polyvagal theory. And I really, focus on the vagal nerve because it's the nerve that innervates our whole GI tract, including the small intestines. Mm-hmm. It also innervates, there's a plexus. It kind of innervates, kind of indirectly, but rather directly to the plexus for the prostate, and even the cervix for the woman. So sex, like especially if it's extended, like let's talk about like tantric sex or Taoist sex. It's really like for the nervous system, particularly the parasympathetic nervous system and oxytocin systems, to be very healing and naturally, going to increase all that. And HRV is a reflection of all of it. So if we can't get it up, there's rigidity, there's inflexibility in our whole GI tract, in the nervous system there. And a lot of times too, it's even people, when they have negative thoughts and inner critic or addictions or just somewhere there's trauma. We all have trauma. In my health journey, even my health journey was traumatizing because I didn't trust my body anymore. For 8 years, I had to like dig and like figure the fuck out, like, how am I going to get myself healthier and get to work again? It was pharmaceuticals that really triggered. It wasn't one thing, but many, many things. Right. And I had to like undo all that and figure it all out on my own. I worked with several experts and honestly, it didn't get anywhere, but they shined clues for me, and helped me in that regard. So it was hard. So our we get traumatized and our heart rate variability may be a reflection of it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so this exercise is what I tell people. You want to hear about it?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So 3 times a week, people engage in this oxytocin exercise. And I say 3 times because if I say 1, they're never going to do it. But if I say 3, they'll at least do it once a week and they'll start to see the benefit. Yeah. The benefit of huge oxytocin surges that maybe they've never experienced in their life. Even though evolutionary like you, I think we were tribal and we had constant oxytocin surges like all day long, whether we wanted to or not. Because even 10 minutes of running produces the same amount of oxytocin as 10 minutes of sex. And a mom giving breast milk, the letdown, high amount of oxytocin. Or just looking at a baby, looking at their baby beloved. Or if you look at your Facebook, if you look at a stranger, you don't get oxytocin, but you look at a beloved, bam, huge oxytocin. Right. Yeah, that's what studies show. So this exercise utilizes all our love languages and mutual reciprocity. It utilizes all 5 of our senses too. Because our senses is our whole ear, nose, throat, and it's connected to our heart and the gut. And we don't always, this is the purpose of our gut. It's our second way of sensing other than ear, nose, throat, right? Tasting, touching, smelling, hearing. Our gut senses like the PPAR system. I studied like all these nuclear receptors. PPAR is amazing, right? It's a muscle builder. We can take even like supplements for it and fake, synthetics on it. It senses our food, the omega-3s and fats and all kinds of things. And it builds our body. It heals so many things, keeps us insulin sensitive. So our whole body senses, and our ear, nose, throat, using all our senses is the way to do it. So I had them use like a massage oil, something healthy like coconut oil or almond oil if you're not allergic to that, or olive oil is even best. And if they add a little essential oil, you're getting scent, right? And that's a bit of taste as well, right? A line there. And they're visually seeing each other. So, like eye gazing, we can promote the same level of oxytocin surges as even running or sex, just through eye gazing. A lot of people can't even do that. They can't even stare at themselves in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're not connected to themselves, right? Like we're in this isolated world or all these addictions. The reverse is not sobriety, it's connection. And then that's how we get our oxytocin back, if it's been broken or blunted, whatever it might be. So there's eye gazing, and then we have hearing, because there's this component. I have them, the receiver is also receiving words of affirmation from the person providing the touch. So it's touch therapy, any method they want, maybe just massage or just touch, with or without clothes on, it doesn't matter. And then it's hearing these affirmations, like for instance, like, oh, honey, the other day I saw it has to be with a partner they feel safe with. So it can be a good friend as well. Let's say someone's not partnered up, it could be a good friend they trust, where they feel safe and there's trust, right? So they can say like, oh yeah, the other day I saw you taking out trash, and say why they felt that. So, oh, the other day I saw you taking trash and it made me feel so cared for, because that day I was really bombarded. I had a lot of things to do, and it really unloaded a burden off of me. Yeah. Or like, oh, the other day, you put your hand on my shoulder and looked me in the eye, and I felt so loved. That made me feel, I just love that. It made me feel, because it made me feel so cherished. So it gets people out of their head. We spend way too much time being disconnected, running loops and, analyzing and problem solving in our head. We're not in our heart. And that's the problem with HRV. It's a measure of our heart. How much time we spend there connected to others, right? Loving on others, serving ourselves and connecting to ourselves. I'll tell you, people who do these exercises, they're compliant with it. I'll tell you, 90% of their food allergies go away in a week.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We can start cutting back. I mean, they could take a pile of supplements with me, which they'll have to, or we can try to naturally utilize our ancestrally, 500 million years honed pathways. Well, one guy, he was trying to gain weight. He's a hard gainer. He's trying to gain weight in our lean gut class. He's like, Grace, I have a problem. Every woman I have this exercise with, they just want to fuck me afterwards. I'm like, yeah, sorry.
Right, he's complaining?
Yeah, I was like, maybe learn to set better boundaries with your.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. So Elisa and I hug often because I like to hug personally.
Yeah. Well, beautiful.
But I can tell you the days that we didn't hug much, because I feel just happier on the days that we hug often, and the days that we don't, because we're both going in different directions, or there's some drama happening that I can tell those days. And there's a study that backs that up. There's a guy who did a TED talk that I had on my show.
Yeah.
That he said, the study goes, this short side of it is, people who hug 8 times a day are happier. And so that's another exercise. And it works better to hug someone you love. You know what I mean? And that's why having sex with a person you love lowers your blood pressure. Masturbating raises your blood pressure. It's all about connection for us. It's all about that connection. It really is.
It is, absolutely. Like, I'm a big fan of the gamma core, and that's shown to help LPS, but it's not the same degree if we do like third eye meditation and some, deep breathing meditation. Not at all. They don't even alter cytokines, sadly, with the gamma core study, or they didn't do a high enough dose. You got to pulse it 30 to 36 times a day, actually, to simulate, I think, what we do on our own. But we have so many ways, to change our rhythms, and that's the ideal to get. And when people go on vacation, well, how do they, tolerate being, eating like an asshole, gluten and dairy all day long and have no problems. Whereas, they
Right.
come home, a little smidgen of gluten. Oh my God, they're like, ill
Fascinating.
again.
That's
Right.
fast. You're
But
right.
because when you're on vacation, you have higher oxytocin. You're doing all the things you love. You're in
Laying
bliss.
in the sun. For me,
Yes, son.
I lay in the sun all day long for 10 days and think that's the best vacation in the world. I love to lay in
Me
the sun.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll fly like a million miles away just to lie on a beach in Ibiza or Portugal,
Yeah.
right? And I'm
And
I'm
apparently,
happy as a fucking clam.
apparently my grandmother on my father's side was exactly that way. She had like 11 children. She'd take them all to Coney Island in the summertime and and she was so dark. I actually thought she was African American until I was about 12 years old. Seriously, I'm
Yeah.
14% Northern African. So
I
I got that
yes.
from her. I got that from
I'm
her.
Asian, but I have no Caucasian relatives according to Ancestry and 23andMe. My closest relatives are Nigerian, and I do think like having darker skin, or if we use melanotan 1 or 2, or a little bit
I
of
do.
PT 141, it may block our natural vitamin D production. We're missing some part of the spectrum by skin production, and that can sometimes run into issues. Yeah.
Well, if the darker you are, the more time you have to spend in the sun. You get
Yeah.
some Swedish guy. He spends 15 minutes in the sun. He
Oh,
produces
15 seconds.
1,000
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
and that's because that was a protective mechanism because our ancestors were in the sun all the time, so the body had to adjust.
Right.
Let's see. We have some questions. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of vitamin D, we track a couple things because there's a lot of reasons why some people have low vitamin D. One is if they have a systemic infection like Cryptococcus, Mycobacterium.
Right.
We check the calcitriol, the active, so
That's right.
1.5 OH2, OH2D2, or the other variants, and also their bile. So if there's like super high biliary problems, some people require like whatever 200,000 units of vitamin D. It's because it's their gut and mold and Lyme and many other things. So there's a lot of reasons if someone's D levels aren't coming up, or we don't want to do it. It's contraindicated if they have these systemic infections. But after 1 or 2 rounds of therapy with us, different botanicals, we can add the D later. But there's like a vampire syndrome in some of our clients that we see, especially if they're SIRS or high mold. They already have so much infection. Their neutrophils and immune cells are pumping out vitamin D. It's to get them to calcify, slow down, and they're trying to kill things with the vitamin D systems. But then they end up soft tissue calcifying, right? Because they've now made too much. So it's always
But
looking at pathways.
eat your green vegetables and get natural vitamin K, and that'll solve that problem. So this, am I right about that? Vitamin K is the one that keeps calcification and soft tissue at bay.
They can still have some issues. So we
Really?
just try to be safer, look at the root issue, and get other rhythms going before we do that. But then usually in a 2 months or less, yeah, we recheck the active D, the calcitriol, and we can start vitamin D at that point.
So
and they
this
feel
is
better
something.
stopping it.
Okay. This is something that I used to believe. Look at where your ancestry is and eat the foods that were naturally available to them. Do you think that plays a role in the diet? Like, I'm Italian, but I'm also Northern African. And if I look at that region of the world, what was available 1,000 years ago for these people to eat? And should I look at that as a model for my diet? Or have we just morphed into so many different times since then?
I don't have a good answer for that. That's a really fabulous question. I mean, I've wondered myself too. I have to tell you, like, I'm ApoE2, E3. I don't have the risk factors for Alzheimer's, but I could see I could develop that if I had diabetes or insulin, changes that are pretty severe.
Right.
But I'm ApoE2. I'm very agrarian adapted from my ancestry.
Mm-hmm.
E2 came later, and being like evolved from the equator, I do eat fruit and grains with no problem. I went keto for 18 months, and that was like, and did endurance training, like a bunch of half marathons and mini triathlons, and I nearly killed myself. It led to extreme, like, it was a form of yo-yo dieting and trashing my adrenals, and my thyroid and other hormones just would not come up for the fuck of me. So people have to, I think it is important to look at ancestry to some degree, but not go, also know, like, we have a context to what's going on currently, and some people can't eat starches in the beginning because they're full of, mold.
Well, and I want to talk about mold too in a second. So I used to believe this. I used to believe like just go 300 years back and whatever your ancestors were eating, that was what you should eat. But then I started thinking critically. And I said, well, wait a minute. What if I go 5,000 years back? Now I'm in Africa. What foods were like? So really, the reason I've abandoned that idea is because one of the things that makes us so high on the food chain is we are able to adapt and genetically and epigenetically adapt long term to what's available to us. So, I mean, if it's true you should eat what your ancestors eat, then we have to go all the way back to Africa, which is the cradle of life, and see what we were eating back then. But that's not true because it's changed so many times. So I think finding what works for you is an individual journey. Would you agree with that?
I believe in Lamarckian genetics, where we in this generation are evolving, and it's probably because of our microbiome, because their cells equal our cells.
Right.
They're small.
Right.
They're small. They're tiny like our mitochondria. Well, they are like mitochondria. Mitochondria came from bacteria.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, exactly. It infected us, and look what it did for us.
Yeah.
We have a question here, and I'm thinking I need to just direct this gentleman to get in touch with you individually because it's so hard to help people on a show. But he says, just joined, but what kind of diet would be good for my daughter? She's 14, has thyroid, celiac disease, and one kidney and a few other issues. I seem to be able to get her gut issues under control. She's always having gut pain. And there's the second part of that question is I've been trying to get her gut issues under control. Not enough coffee, LOL. What I meant to say. So can people reach out to you directly and work with you directly?
Yes, absolutely. They can reach us at info@the Gut Institute. My staff and I will respond to that.
Info at the Gut Institute.
Right.
.com.
Oh, the gutinstitute.com.
Okay. Info at the gutinstitute.com. Sammy, who's watching on YouTube, please reach out. And because it's too complicated, you have to be able to have a dialogue, back and forth questions. It's impossible. People email me asking for advice, and it takes 6 days to do what a phone call does. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly.
So reach out.
Right.
Info at, is it the Gut Institute or just Gut Institute?
thegutinstitute.com. Right.
Okay.
It is very complex. Like I think we have about 80 different systems in our body, and we have to look at toxins. We have to look at the hormones. There's a lot of things. I promote the 4 R's. So we have like rhythms, recolonize, tongue to toes. So it includes the sinuses and ear, nose, throat, looking at all the R's, like different root issues. So toxins are just huge. We may not have a large amount of mercury, but then you add in mycotoxins, you add in EMF and all of these problems, and add in a bunch of emotional trauma. Like, okay, small amounts of all of them don't break the camel's back, but you add them all together, it's definitely going to break a lot of things. Yeah.
And it's amazing. And in the environment that we live in today, we are being poisoned on so many different levels. It's ridiculous. Glyphosate is a mild antibiotic unless you get more of it. They say it's an antimicrobial, but the Monsanto has a patent on a combination of amoxicillin and glyphosate to be used as an antibiotic in children. Think about that. Glyphosate as an antibiotic. And then they spray this stuff, especially if you eat bread and you eat conventional bread. They literally spray glyphosate on the crop to synchronize it. What that means is if you have 100 acres of wheat, 60% of the crop is ready to be cut. The other 40% isn't. So how do you synchronize the crop? When the wheat is threatened with death, it matures very quickly, like literally in 3 days. So they spray the glyphosate on the whole crop, and then they wait a couple days, and then they cut it, and then it becomes a flour and in your bread. So these products are horrible, and that's why I don't eat any bread products anymore. I just really don't. I'm not going to try to choose which one is good. I don't give a shit if it's sprouted or not sprouted. But I know it's
I concur. I concur. Yeah.
So Sammy says he's going to get in touch with you. So that's good. That's where it starts. Make a phone call, have a conversation. Cola Quench, who is also watching on YouTube, says, sorry if this has been answered, but what is her favorite resistant starch and other prebiotic foods?
So this is like really great to go back ancestrally. Like I actually studied a lot of foods in Africa just because I knew of some Nigerian connection, and there's a lot of fermented beans there. Even they didn't. It's a equatorial, really sunny area, just like Taiwan and parts of China, where there wasn't refrigeration, which we really didn't have the last 100 years, right? I mean, only the new last 100 years had refrigeration. So the way our kindred preserved food was through fermentation, a souring process. And that included even protein containing foods like beans. So, I don't know if you like natto from Japan, that
I
really
do.
stinky
Yeah.
beans.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are in the cradle of life. In Africa, there's like 20 million different kinds of fermented beans. And in Asia,
Right.
they have that as well too. And they even have tofu that's fermented and all kinds of things. Like, and in Vietnam, they have little like fertilized eggs, like the little baby egg is in there and then they bury it or it gets fermented
Yeah.
like cheese.
Yeah.
Like every
Yeah.
culture has different
Has
forms
this
of
stuff. Yeah.
food to eat all year round, that are fermented, and some may smell pretty horrid, but this is what we got accustomed to, the umami flavor, this salty, cheesy flavor. And of course, all across Europe, where they had dairy, or like in Mongolia, fermented mare's milk. I'm sure that was quite a bouquet, right?
Yeah.
Mare's milk, horse milk. So every culture has this, and this is what they ate and survived and thrived. They were getting their postbiotic, prebiotic, everything, probiotics. And
Mhm.
so there was a really great Thailand study. They had rice noodles you think are really high glycemic index, but rice noodles in Thailand, they also have fish sauce, which is fermented, real fish sauce, not fake,
Right.
and then a lot
Right.
of lime juice. And so they're
And
souring up.
vinegar, like when you eat
Yes,
sushi, which I like sake.
exactly.
I like sashimi much better, but that
Yeah,
has vinegar. That slows the
exactly.
GI emptying of
Right,
the, and it
right.
doesn't spike sugar.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Italians and some French, right? They love to eat salad. It's usually at the end of the meal, or there's pickles, naturally
See,
fermented pickles,
God
sauerkrauts
bless
in
you.
Germany
God
and
bless you.
Sweden.
So I go to Italian restaurants with friends, and we order salads, and I put mine to the side, and I say to the waiter, "Don't my salad, fire my entree." And people will go to me, "Why do you do that?" And I say, "Well, that's the way I was raised. We eat antipasta, which is like an
Yes.
appetizer, and
Hmm.
then you have your salad at the end." And they're like, "Why
Right.
would you do that?" Well, salad digests slow. The food you're eating digests fast. You don't want the fast digesting food behind the slow, because then you're going to feel all bloated. And then the salad comes through and cleans everything like Roto-Rooter.
Right.
This is how
Yes.
the Italians really eat it. Yeah, I know. People don't get that.
Exactly.
They don't get it.
Yeah. And there's tons of ACV studies, raw apple cider vinegar studies. Like people literally just drink 1 or 2 tablespoons diluted in water and they lose like 5-10 pounds. Like they're not doing anything else, like at
Right.
all. So that's
Yeah,
a lean gut tip we do in our weight loss class. Yeah.
All
Very
right,
simple
we
little changes.
have more questions lining up. The audience is obviously loving the interview today. I'm going to take one quick commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk about
Yeah.
fungi.
Yeah.
A lot of people have toe fungi. They have toenail fungus. Is that indicative of greater degree of fungus in their bodies, or
Oh yeah.
is it?
They have.
Let's talk about it when we come back from this break. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Dr. Grace. What? I'm telling you, I'm getting bad. Grace Lou.
Lou
be right
rhymes with poo.
Gracie Lou. Be right back. Stay with us.
Yeah.
Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork./legendary. for has a product been so appropriately named as Botanic Tonics Feel Free. This plant-based elixir combines a variety of different effective compounds, all from raw plant materials that at different doses provide you with completely different experiences. A third of a bottle puts you in the zone and makes you very focused and is ideal for a non-stimulating pre-workout. It also has a mild analgesic effect for us older lifters who have soreness and little pains and aches that keep us from training as ferociously as we want. A half a bottle will create a mild euphoric effect that will allow you to forego consuming alcohol, but still be socially lubricated and have fun. I have never had a product deliver on its name the way Botanic Tonics Feel Free does, and I won't ever be without it, and you shouldn't either. Go to shrnetwork.biz/feelfree and use the code SHR40 for 40% off your first order. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. There have been no real breakthroughs in resistance training for over 200 years. Whether it's pulleys or free weight, they all depend on gravity and the angles associated with gravity's effect directly on the weight. All of that has changed with the ARX machine. ARX stands for adaptive resistance. The ARX machine uses a 25 horsepower motor. You are literally fighting against a 25 horsepower motor, so every single rep is your 1 rep maximum at that moment in time. But ARX leverages another technique that has been known to produce rapid muscle gains and strength, and that is it leverages the eccentric or negative portion of the rep, which completely blows every other exercise and resistance training product out of the water. Go to shrnetwork.biz/ARX and discover the future of resistance training. Merrick Health is a premium telehealth platform that connects customers with partnered providers from the comfort of your home. Merrick provides concierge service with your very own patient care provider as your health advocate. You'll go over all your needs and goals from improving sexual function, hair loss prevention, increased muscle, fat loss, and overall improved performance. Prescribed treatment options can be ordered and shipped directly to you if you meet the requirements. All from the comfort of your home. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Marek Health. That's MAREKHEALTH and order your comprehensives and get 10% off with code SHR. Don't forget to add the lab analysis to have results reviewed, potential over-the-counter supplements or treatment recommendations. That's shrnetwork.biz/Marek Health and use code SHR at checkout. Or order your own desired labs with code SHR and get 10% off your first lab order. I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/MyPillow when you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 800-889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where we use oxygen for the power of good.
Hey, welcome back. Oh, hit the wrong button. I'll get it. By tomorrow, I'll be back to normal. We're talking with Dr. Grace Liu. I want to also mention we have a new sponsor coming aboard, and I'm telling you, I'm really excited about them. They make a low-carb, keto snacks. We all need more snacks. It's called Shrewd Foods. You're going to love these. They sent me a case of samples before the holiday that I'll be using right now to show you what they look like and eating them. They're gone. I ate them all. They have chocolate-covered keto dippers, which have 12 grams of protein and less than 2 grams of carbs per pack. But this keto crack, it's like a Nestle's Crunch Bar, if you remember those. But it's all protein, and it's delicious, and it tastes like real garbage chocolate. I mean, you know, the stuff that's bad for you. So the way to reach them is shrnetwork.biz/shrewd, SHREWD food. You'll start hearing their commercials and get 25% off using the code SHR25. They'll be around for a while. I've been waiting for a year and a half for them to come on the show because they want their products to be exactly perfect before they release them. Very, very cool. Let's talk about mold. People have indications of mold on their bodies, but these are external, toenails and different types of fungal infections on the skin. Is this indicative that there's something going on fungally in the body as well?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, in Chinese medicine, we look at, how white the tongue is, how yellow the tongue is, how red, that's more viral and bacterial when combined with fungal. It any skin manifestation or scalp like seborrheic dermatitis, flaky eyelash or hair loss even is a sign. Male pattern baldness is not just hormone related or DHT related. It's fungal malassezia and candida and molds at the root, at the follicle.
So how do you approach, like, the hard thing to do is just cut out all sugar, but does that really make like mold go away? Because I know that microbes can spore and go into suspended animation. So you think they're gone, but they're really not.
Yeah, mold, bacteria, my probiotic, I ran out, but we have a Microbiome Mojo. These are spore-based bacteria. Many of our hardiest bacteria go into suspended animation. It's to keep them, safe in a hostile environment. And molds do that as well. They also spread that way. Therefore, if you see black mold, you breathe in just a little bit. Oh my God, you're just getting billions and billions and billions of them, and then they end up in the body. And
so this is
affect a lot of things.
Sammy Glass, who asked the question about his daughter. I guess the mom is using the same screen. I'm her mommy, FYI. Sorry, can you say the website again? And I'm loving this podcast, learning a lot. So the way to reach out to Dr. Lou is info@thegutinstitute.com. Send an email there and open up an opportunity to chat by phone to find out what options are available. The website, we can give the website, but the website isn't where they should go, right? They should just contact.
Our information's at the contact. My staff can call them. Yes.
Yeah, that's the best way. Go contact them, because you have some really unique questions that require a lot more questions from Dr. Lou's side to be able to give you a real answer. But if anybody wants to go to the website, it's easy. If you use the URL that we set up specifically to track to make sure that people like going there, is shrnetwork.biz/gut reset, GUTRESET. And if you find things there that you want to buy, you can save 10% by using SHR10. But really, for your individual questions, you really do need to go and set up a phone call and have a conversation. So, how do we stop mold? I mean, there's lots of antifungals that are out there. Some of them can harm the liver, some of them don't. But I've heard that you have to use a multitude of different antifungals to really get the mold under control in your body. Is that true?
There are different methods. There are so many different protocols out there. I like to look at the whole system and measure also against other toxins going on. Mold and fungi like candida, they like to affiliate with heavy metals. I used to have a whole mouthful every quadrant, heavy metals, it's silver and mercury. And then I had a titanium implant. I had an IUD, which was plastic, but it was another hardware surface, intrauterine device. I mean, and then, the metals, we brought up oxalates earlier. When we have magnesium and oxalate, they melt very easily. They don't harden. They don't calcify anywhere in the soft tissues, according to studies. In vitro, if you add mercury there, the solubility quotient will go up 10,000-fold. In other words, it won't melt at all. If you got mercury and oxalate stuck together, no melting. And that's how mercury kills us. Then the biofilms where we have mold or parasites or candida or wherever the fuck of any pathogens that live, they just don't ever go away. We can do 20 protocols. It'll be very, very difficult.
So I did 2 shows on EDTA chelation therapy, and I actually use the suppository form because I can do it when I want. I don't have to go get an IV. Plus, I like sticking my finger up my butt. No, just kidding. But so EDTA is effective for removing mercury and some other heavy metals, even iron. What do you think?
EDTA doesn't get mercury. Yeah, you have to use
Does
cilantro or some botanicals or DMSA, DMPS.
And see, the
EDTA
DMSA that's the one that could be harmful. So it's obviously stronger.
all are harmful. EDTA
Yeah.
will rip your good zinc and iodine and selenium, boron. Boron rate keeps our testosterone up for men and women and bones, strength of bones. I mean, everything we do will have a negative. There's a problem. Even a keto diet will have a negative. Right? Like even a centenarian ancestral diet, for someone ill with SIRS, like it'll kill them. So we just have to look at the context.
What is your opinion of the carnivore diet? And the carnivore diet, the way good. The way I do.
A lot of people will say, "Oh, I can't eat kale." Well, let's look at your oxalates and maybe where they might be in your body and where there might be fungal overload, mold overload.
I do keto diet. I do a carnivore diet where I allow myself berries and the occasional apple, and I feel great when I do it. But I don't know how long. I mean, I've really been doing some form of it for decades now. But do you think that strictly carnivore diet, the hardcore carnivore, salt, beef, water, do you think there's potential dangers for doing that too long?
I think potentially, if you don't have a good mucus production at your MAM, the mucosal associated microbiome, you may be causing some of that mucus to shrink because you don't have enough bifido, enough fiber, prebiotics, like superfoods to fuel the protection, the angels, the guardians there. And maybe that explains certain food allergies. For a lot of people, what they can't eat tells me a lot. And when we can expand that, usually in just 2 weeks or less, it starts by, some of our clients, they just start with a smidgen of fermented foods or a smidgen of kombucha or a smidgen of, something, whatever, and then they can slowly start rebuilding things, but they have to, make that bridge, and believe it, like, trust me, right? If people have fear, okay, then their whole vagal nerve and their whole heart rate variability, right, is going to tank. And I'm not going to force someone to do anything. They have to trust and know it's going to help them in the end. But often when they can, they slowly start to rebuild their health, their hormones. And my adrenal diet for people is based on many clients' experiences and really what's shown in the literature about cortisol and adrenaline. We have to eat all our macros to have really great hormone function, no matter what someone's genetics are. That is just what it comes down to. For keto to work, our brain has a preferential for sugar, and I'm not going to lie. If we have a sugar of, I used to be a CDE, certified diabetes educator. So I used to, start insulin for people, count carbs, and manage, people on pumps, insulin pumps. And if their sugar went down to 40, like, that's close to death. They can only stand that for like 5-10 minutes, and actually it's a DUI.
Oh, really?
If they're driving and your sugar goes too low and you're not functional so well and you hit somebody or kill somebody, it's a DUI. And so I'd have to warn them, like, okay, hey, you're on metformin or blah, 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 and maybe insulin. You have to be careful because what we're giving you may end up in jail. So you have to be cognizant, carry glucose tabs with you, blah, blah, blah. There are negatives to anything we do if we're not careful. I used to take some berberine, really high turmeric, and I couldn't even do a workout. I'm like, what the fuck? Well, my sugars were tanked. I was like barely at 59.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of compounds. Like, for instance, never ever combine niacin with beta alanine. So niacin will keep the liver from releasing free fatty acids, and beta alanine will suppress glucose, and you literally go into a diabetic coma. I took a large dose. I take niacin periodically for a variety of reasons. People don't realize.
I love niacin.
Yeah. You don't need NAD plus. If you get enough niacin and you buy it, you make your own NAD plus. But the original formula for Gatorade included 200 milligrams of niacin per serving, because that reduces free fatty acid, which allows the body to produce growth hormone, because high fat is is a stat. So the guys at the Florida State or wherever it was, they said, we'll just replenish, but we'll increase growth hormone. Well, the problem with that was by reducing free fatty acids, if these guys were running low on the ability to produce glucose, they would be like passed out. I actually almost passed out at the gym one day, a heavy leg day, and I thought, I'm going to take beta alanine this morning. And I took my beta alanine and my niacin, and I had no fuel in my blood, and I laid there dripping sweat. I was like super hypoglycemic, just dripping sweat. Like, what the fuck is going on? And then I figured it out.
You had a hot flash.
Yeah, I had a half hour hot flash. So what about glutamine to replenish the mucosal barriers in the gut? Does it make it into the stomach, or does it make it down further?
I mean, glutamine is really cheap. It's a great amino acid. I prefer postbiotics and what dose probiotic if we can get an FMT, a fecal microbiota transplant level of probiotics to really recolonize and get the AMPs, antimicrobial peptides, up. The problem with glutamine is that it won't transform into GABA for those with G8A1 mutations, which is every executive, every athlete, every high functional mom I have. Yeah. They're addicted to adrenaline because they don't break it down. They get used to these higher and higher and higher levels when they really should get addicted to yoga. And then along with G81, it's also MAO-A, MAO-B, and they're not breaking down their estrogens also. They're really high estrogenic state for both men and women. And some of these they're measurable, some aren't, in testing, we have a lot of environmental, metals, estrogens, even mercury. It binds irreversibly to ER, beta and alpha receptors. That's not good, because we can't measure always these estrogenic effects, but they're there, so they're known as metalloestrogens. So we're just super toxified. And I just try to look at someone's, overall makeup, because we can change all that. I make a Dragon Mojo. It's an endurance product for athletes and executives and men and women. It helps revive all kinds of things in morning wood and, all day long boners without nitric oxide. Well, it's because we have triples in there. It's antifungal. And then we have like 2 estrogen blockers because we're just so estrogenic right now. We're in this transgender epidemic, epically right now. Like men are becoming women, women are becoming men, PCOS state, right? And all our frogs are females. They can't even really repopulate if you think about the way our Earth is being so saturated with these. So we have to do what we can to kind of bring it about. And I know you love, a lot of people who watch this show, they love all the telomeres and extension, everything that people love. They're anti-mold. Rapamycin is anti-mold.
Really?
Yeah. Doxycycline, it's anti-mold, antifungal. Azithro, a little bit, and it synergizes with antifungals to be anti-mold. So almost everything we look at, I like the lens of pharmacology. I'm like, well, how is it working?
You think there's a link between mold and senescent cells? Because all the things you just mentioned reduce senescent cell accumulation.
You're right, totally.
Holy
because
shit.
I sent you an email right before the show, but antibiotics, they're in our feed. Unless you're eating super organic, the cow before it was slaughtered, grass-fed, organic. Everything has antibiotics. All our chicken, our eggs, it's in our air, water. It's in our drinking water. It's in our municipal water. You have to get RO water. Charcoal filters probably aren't enough. And we're just so, the antibiotics are everywhere too, right? And then we also have, cardiac drugs in there, diabetic drugs in there, and they all have an effect on us. Like they are depleting more and more nutrients. SSRIs, right?
There was an article about 5 years ago that there are measurable amounts of SSRIs in tap water. I mean, oh shit, really? Look, and there's some of these bottled. I'm with you. Our reverse osmosis is the only way. Then add your minerals back in. That's the right way to do it if you want to avoid being destroyed by drinking water.
Yeah, Centenarians, they usually had a well source, a spring source with high minerals. You have to consider how to get the minerals back in. Like soaking is a great way because we're bypassing the gut. If you have a terrible gut, you have yeast in the gut, you're not absorbing any minerals. And if you don't have zinc, you can't make your proton pumps. You're not making acid anymore. And then without acid, you're not absorbing zinc. So then it gets into this whole vicious cycle. So antibiotics are lovely. I'm grateful I had antibiotics. I had a terrible third-degree burn when I was a kid. I mean, if it was another generation, I could have lost my leg, got septic, would have had to have it amputated. I'm grateful for steroids and antibiotics,
Right.
But
Right.
studies are showing instantly when people have one round of ofloxacin or Keflex or amoxicillin, Augmentin, Septra for UTIs, it doesn't matter. They are instantly full of yeast. I sent you the studies where 100% almost of isolates, like whether they're throat, or asymptomatic vaginal for women, they're instantly positive for these fungal cultures. And this is a problem because when you have dysbiosis, this is when the viruses go crazy. So now we see this surge of like throat cancers, mouth cancers, HPV related. Why? Well, you have dysbiosis first of bacteria and yeast. Of course, the viruses are just going to go do their thing. And you have melanomas, they're HPV and EBV related. These are sad things. People will get chemoradiation and they're going to mess up even more of their biome and not even be able to eat. They might be in chronic pain and neuropathy later. So I just want to bring these things up because we do protocols where we're looking at fungal overgrowth, looking at metabolites. We have a much narrower range of like a threshold. Everybody has them because everyone's had antibiotics. No one is exempt, or their mom had it, and so they never got a good biome, and they got their mom's fungi and mold. This is where mold may come from. Yes, my kids.
Yeah,
like you.
I lost coming into. Look, my mother smoked cigarettes, was taking Librium, which is the drug that predecessor to Valium. Once she was pregnant with me, and then I was a C-section. Like I should be really dead. Either that, or I should be retarded. I should either be dead or retarded. There's no doubt in my mind about it.
You have amazing genetics. That's why we're all here.
I know. You know why I have amazing genetics? Because I did a lot of drugs when I was young. A lot of LSD.
Yeah.
That's. I actually died back in the around 1978, but I didn't realize it yet. I'm still moving.
That is my favorite bioregulator, the one amino acid, melatonin or DMT or some synthetic derivative.
Yeah. So there's two more things I want to talk about. The first one, I'm going to jump ahead. I'm looking at questions. The first one is biofilms, right? We have all these companies talking about get rid of your biofilms. But I remember reading studies on HIV/AIDS and breastfeeding mothers feeding their newborn babies. And the reason the baby didn't get the AIDS is because there were biofilms in the breast milk that sequestered the virus. The baby, are biofilms bad, good, helpful? I mean, don't they do a job? And why do we want to get rid of all the biofilms in our gut?
Well, so to review, the biofilm is like a mucus where our good flora as well as bad flora may live. Like, let's say, you have a cat or a dog or an adult, you leave a cup of water out. And after a few days, like you touch it, like it's kind of jelly on the bottom, like in the cup, right? So that's a biofilm. We have biofilm literally everywhere, or wherever we have mucus. So like at the root of every tooth, even in the breast, because we make milk there. There's a lymph system. There's mucosa that line the lymph, all around the uterus and cervix. Anything outside. So our vagina, is open. Our gut is open. So these all are lined with mucus, and the biofilms hold that mucosa-associated microbiome. These angels, these guardians, and so studies show with colonoscopy, they do the big enema, clear everyone out. Some people, they'll go back, their biome will revert back. Others, they never come back to normal and they stay in a weird state. So I think it depends on the person and maybe their genetics as well, their FUT2 state and other ones, like there's other ones we look at like ATG, 16L and others. Biofilms maybe are downfall, but they also may be, a great protector, like in the end. We don't want to wipe out everything. Like I look at, we get tighter biofilms when there's mercury present, but also when there's a mix of pathogens. So let's say there's a lot of viruses in Epstein-Barr and strep and Pseudomonas and Candida. These are the worst biofilms according to in vitro studies. And fortunately, because I do a lot of botanicals, we do antifungals and botanicals, we see what's dominant and then start to work on them with really good peptide cocktails and really good probiotic cocktails, get diversity in there and the peptides. Then we can change the biofilms in a safe way. Berberine and many botanicals we use, like some antivirals and anti-mold, like Andrographis, let's say, or Hutania, this heart-shaped herb. They actually disturb biofilm in a good way, not like to rip it open and eradicate. Right. Any kind of like modern methods are likely to worsen the scenario, like, but I have found like it's necessary to do some tech because early in my integrative career I tried to do only botanicals. People didn't get anywhere. So it is
Right.
helpful to do certain tech when we can, and I love using, like, studies are showing we can use botanicals. They synergize. Even for certain pharmaceuticals, we can synergize, and we're getting as much killing or more than additive effects, because they're synergistic, and we don't have to use so much itraconazole, fluconazole, and all these other things. And also, if
Right.
people have broken
Yeah.
mitochondria, you don't want to use those because they're toxic to mitochondria and liver.
And I want to ask a question because of what you said about the biofilms and eradicating everything in there. I was once told, and I don't know if it's true, so I'm asking you to validate it, that the appendix serves as a spare parts for all of the microbes in your gut, that if you had to reseed, the appendix would have everything you need in that. Is that true?
I've read some cases of that, yeah. And even Akkermansia is like a storage form. There's like a seed collection. Yeah, but we can also lose
That's
it. I think some people can still have good health, but some don't. Apparently, there's higher risk for spleen problems or something. Leukemia. Or I don't know. There's different statistically related things. But I don't think it can be necessarily true if we look at integrative medicine.
Last question. Fungi. So a eukaryocyte has a nucleus, right?
Yes.
Is that so? There's eukaryocytes and there's prokaryocytes. Is that?
Yeah. So bacteria are prokaryotes. Yeah, and then everything else is eukaryotic if they're not viral. So plants and animals.
So fungi and mold are eukaryocytes, which means that they're smarter than the microbes. And I've heard that fungi will surround itself, will literally corral itself with microbes that poop out the things that they like to eat. So they're almost like they're almost like gut farmers, right? They raise cows, they eat beef. They keep the microbes around them that keep them alive. They're intelligent. In other words, mold is intelligent.
They are very intelligent. Yeah. So it's hard to eradicate Helicobacter pylori. There was a Nobel Prize winning Trevor Marshall, right? Well, what he didn't know was that H. pylori can survive because it hides and hibernates and evades the immune system by living in Candida, or maybe Candida attracts it, right, and says, "Hey, come here."
Interesting.
Yeah, and then we keep losing our acidity and gastric acid. You never get rid of Candida. It helps Candida, it helps H. pylori. They collude that way. But once we start to, get the bifido back in there, get good strep in there, get good flora, it all changes. It mitigates so quick. They have to be collaborative.
And interestingly, and that's why this whole idea that H. pylori is, in fact, young children who don't have H. pylori tend to be asthmatic. And as soon as they replace the H. pylori, their asthma subsides.
Yes, we can even track human migration with H. pylori tracking through calcified stools, petrified poop.
Yes, I've heard that.
Yeah.
Right.
H. pylori is fascinating because it went in our sewage from our stools, and they can just track it in the types. It's fascinating.
You have time for just 2 more questions?
Oh, sure. Yes.
Okay. I'm one of those people who looks in the toilet after I poop. I believe the secrets to my diet are in my poop. If my poop is well formed and semi-solid, I believe that's good. But if it's like fast self-serve ice cream, soft-serve ice cream, that's not good. During the pandemic, people were running out and hoarding toilet paper, and all I kept thinking was, what's wrong with them? Like, what do they crap out that they have to wipe 60 times? I'm very proud of what I'm going to say right now, and it's probably
you're like a cat. You're like a carnivorous cat.
I wipe once, and there's virtually nothing on the toilet paper after I poop because I'm not making mud.
You have Lion King genes. I don't know.
Does your poop tell a story? Very few people want to look in their toilet.
Well, I don't rely on poop and Bristol score only. That's known as a Bristol score, to see if it's like a nice snake and it doesn't float and there's no like greasy pools in the water, no streaking. I don't rely on that. If there's something going on, people are dealing with something, the metabolomic test is one of our best, like if we're going to read tea leaves, at the bottom of a cup and be all woo about it. It's kind of woo right now.
Yeah, read
but
tea leaves.
sadly,
I like that. Read poop at the bottom of the toilet. That's my new thing. I'll read your poop for you. That's funny. That's funny. All right, this has been fantastic, and we have to do this again.
Ways. I know we have so many ways to heal, which is just so fascinating. Like some of my 50-year-old executive men, they're doing all the best exercises, right? But they have a little bit of stool, or IBD issues. They thought they were eating the right ways. They didn't know, like their gut can be a big problem, and it's decades and decades of gut problems, right? So we, do 4 phases. We focus parasites, and all the little microbes we work with, they live within one another. So we always go big to small, but we also do concurrent protocols. We're doing some antivirals, antifungals all at the same time, anti-mold, while we're binding all the junk up. And, one executive, he never had 6-pack abs, even though he was a power lifter. And he has 3 sons, all elite athletes, they're stunning people. Well, within 2 months of our protocols, he had 6-pack abs, and then his testosterone was like off the chart. His doc was who's integrative. He's like, "What the fuck are you doing? I'm like, get him off of testosterone." I'm like, "He's not. I don't even write for testosterone. I can't. Like, I'm just a pharmacist. I'm just a coach, right?" But his levels went over 1100 off this chart for LabCorp or whatever lab they were doing, Quest.
Right.
And with ancestral healthy men and women, they're just not used to. Labs just aren't used to this because they're so used to vanity sizing, and it's because we're sealing and healing the gut, where antibiotics have damaged so many things, or lack of sleep, or modern stressors. The second we have a lot of stress, our microglia and all these bioregulator peptides that we use, the 1 amino acid, tiny ones, 2 amino acid, 3 amino acid, phenylalanine, epitalin, like they're regulating everything to get all the rhythms going again. We can bring back estrus in little hens who've been toxified with xenoestrogens. Just 2 peptides, bam, they're regaining your period. So women who work with us, sometimes they get their period again. They're 50 something. I'm like, yeah, great, you're fertile. You're not fucked.
I gotta believe women are pissed off if you get their period back once they're not doing. Oh God, now I gotta stop.
They feel great. They don't have PMS. They don't have achy boobs. We don't want bone in the boobs.
Right.
Oxalates don't belong in the boobs. So they start off as oxalates. Well, we're clearing the source of the oxalates. We're helping their oxalate degradation, and with glutathione, B6 and other things. Yeah. And then, other people, they're like climbing Mount Whitney and they feel awesome. They get morning wood every day, and that's the way it's supposed to be, no matter what age we are. I had 6-year-old, I was asking him about his BPH. And he's like, "Oh yeah, Grace, well, it's really hard to tell because at midnight I got a boner." And I was like, "What?" Like, so you have morning wood and a midnight wood. Excellent. Yeah. We're doing a good job. He reduced his Hashimoto's. It normalized for the first time in 20 years. He reduced his BPH. His PSA was always over 4. He finally got it below normal. Never had that happen again. And, it was just the microbiome. He had a parasite, 40 freaking years ago, and he thought he took antibiotics, cleared it. Well, when we see one parasite, there's always like 20 others. It doesn't really matter exactly what they are or how many. It's the guardians at the MAM, the mucosa-associated microbiome. They literally regulate so many things: our rhythms, our brain function, the tightness of every junction in the body, whether it's leaky brain, leaky vagina, leaky prostate, leaky gut. And the peptides. So if we're stressed, like our peptides aren't enough, then we got to, do this exogenous source. And that's great. Like, that's why I'm so grateful for all the things you teach, Carl, and, all the peptides we have accessible right now, until other things happen. Many of these like will cure long haul, they'll cure like all kinds of like viral overgrowths and co-infections. Like, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. But you're right. It's better to have your body produce them than you have to use an external source. And that's because if your body's producing them, the homeostatic system is working in your body and everything is working, not just that one thing. If you want to reach out to Dr. Lou, you can email her at info@thegutinstitute.com. And if you want to shop around the website, you can go to, I'm getting old. You can go to shrnetwork.biz/gut reset, GUTRESET. And if you find anything there that you're interested in, you'd like to try, you can save 10% off by using SHR10. This has been fascinating. I look forward to the next opportunity to have you on the show. Really, this has been great. And you know what? I haven't done a 2-hour show in years. This is 2 hours, and the audience stayed for the whole thing. So that means something, right?
Thank you. You guys rock.
Okay. Take care, and we will talk soon. And to my audience, we are still running a couple pre-recorded shows this week, just because I'm just getting the show calendar built back up again. We will be running the show that proves that beef increases telomere length. A fantastic study I first talked about 7 years ago. I dug it up, and we're going to rerun it because it's interesting. It really is, especially with the craze now that beef is bad for you. It's really not. Thank you to Thomas Whittingham for watching. He's always in the background watching my shows. Thank you, very long-term listener. Probably been listening to the show for at least 15 years. And Sammy Glass says, thank you for the show today. And please reach out to Dr. Lou to help your daughter. Okay, that's it. See you. Don't forget, share the show. You never know who in your circle of friends and family are suffering quietly, suffering silently with a problem. And this show could change their lives. So remember to share the show, and we'll see you tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio. Thank you for being here today.